Welcome back. This is Eddie Bromley, and this is the Book of Revelation in 5 minutes, and this is part 6.
Okay, so we're going to try to do this. It is quite a bit cooler tonight than it's been. Today it is, we have 90-degree temperature with about 73% humidity, so about 104 heat index. Tonight we're going to try to get into the first chapter of Revelation. You're going to need two things. One, you're going to need to have a familiarity with the Gospels, the four Gospels. And then number two, you're going to need to have some familiarity or to review the meaning of the Old Testament book of Zechariah. Okay, so sometimes people say there is a hidden code for understanding the book of Revelation. That's absolutely true, and you have it. I'm going to do an experiment with you. Pick up a blank piece of paper and hold it up. That is what you have left when you extract the Old Testament from the book of Revelation. That's what you'll have left. Nothing. So you have to have a pretty good understanding of the Old Testament in order to understand the book of Revelation. Tonight you especially need to understand the book of Zechariah. The book of Zechariah forms around the image of two lampstands. Now, in order to understand that, you need to understand that the purpose of Israel, the purpose of humankind, was to bear the image of God. After humankind failed that, Israel was elected as a nation to bear the light of God to the world, to bear his image to the world. Having failed to do that, they actually inculcated evil. They actually became like the nations around them and went into exile. After they returned from exile, they wanted to know, would this be the time in which God would restore the kingdom and fulfill his promises? And the answer that is given through the prophet Zechariah is a question. That depends. Is Israel ready to bear the light of the world to the nations? Are they ready to bear the image of God to the world? If so, then they're the kind of people through whom God can keep these promises. All right, Jesus is revealed in chapter 1 as the one who walks among the seven lampstands. And those seven lampstands represent seven historical churches that are to bear the image of God to the world. Just like Jesus said, you're the light of the world, you're the salt of the world. They're to do what the prophet Zechariah said, to bear the image of God to the world, and Jesus walks among them. When John sees Jesus, he sees Jesus in all of his glory. Now, here's where the Gospels come in. In 3 of the Gospels, we have something called the Transfiguration. And that's an event where the disciples see Jesus in all of his divine glory. It is as if his human body and his human person become translucent and almost transparent, and become the means through which become the means by which they see the divine Christ. In the book of the Gospel of John and in the resurrection accounts that Luke tells us, one of the things that we find in common is that shortly after the resurrection, sometimes Jesus' disciples did not immediately recognize him because of the divine glory that they seen through him. Will Durant wrote a splendid 11-volume series on the history of civilization. I'm getting ready to start the 4th one in my own reading, but I want to refer to his book on Caesar and Christ, because in that book, Will Durant actually says that the Christ revelation is not the Christ of the Gospels. He's not the Galilean peasant. I want to disagree with him because the Gospels, in order to understand them, you have to understand that Jesus is 100% human and 100% divine. And that doesn't cease to be true in the book of Revelation. John sees Jesus, and yet he sees him in all of his divine glory, and thus is captivated and caught off guard. Now, here's what's important. Jesus says that things are about to get worse for the 7 churches, and they're going to be forced to have to make some choices. They've been suffering. Some of them have been suffering persecution. Some have been suffering in other physical ways. Some of them have simply been tempted to compromise with the world. Well, Jesus says that things are actually about to get worse, and it's going to force them to make some decisions. But he tells them not to fear, that he walks among them. Let me share a real quick story with you that drives home the whole point of Revelation chapter 1. So this is going to make the video a little bit more than 5 minutes. There was an Native American tribe that had an initiation rite whereby when a young male was about to become a man, he was to go out into a part of the forest he'd never been in and spend the night all by himself. There, of course, he'd be terrified. He'd hear all kinds of things, be away from his tribe for the first time, but he had to stay there to prove his courage and his bravery. But as the sun would come up in the morning, he would discover that the men of the tribe had been standing guard around him all night, protecting him unseen. That's what Jesus promises to these 7 churches. No matter what they're about to face, they will not face it alone. I'm Eddie Brumley, and I'll see you at the next episode.